You can kill me, but you can't kill my ideas.
Powerful words. And reportedly, Che Guevara's last ones before his execution, they really capture the whole contradiction of the man we're diving into today.
Absolutely. It's amazing, really. In just 39 years, Ernesto Che Guevara lit this revolutionary flame that, well, it's still burning, isn't it? Still debated, still revered, still hated, even 50 years after his death.
And if all you know is that famous poster, you're missing the real story, the core conflict.
Exactly. Our sources, they all kind of agree on this point. His character's never just black or white. So our mission here is to dig into why. Why is he so complex?
We're definitely going beyond the t-shirt image. We want to trace his journey, Ernesto Rafael Guevara's path, from this fairly privileged Argentinian kid and intellectual all the way to becoming this global revolutionary figure.
And we'll focus on the specifics, right? His early influences, how he changed physically and ideologically, and the really uncompromising beliefs that drove his actions, both the good and the, frankly, terrifying.
That's the plan.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Rosario, Argentina, 1928. Upper middle class family. It doesn't exactly scream future communist guerrilla leader. He was the oldest of 5 kids.
Right. And what hits you immediately is this clash, the privilege on one side, but then these personal challenges and this relentless drive.
You mean the asthma?
Yeah, severe asthma. But despite that, he was incredibly athletic. A swimmer, played football, rugby at a national level, cycling, shooting. I mean, the list goes on.
Wow. So that refusal to give in to physical weakness, that was there from the start.
Definitely. And it wasn't just physical. He had this incredible intellectual energy, too. His family had something like a 3,000-book library at home.
3,000 books. What was he reading?
All sorts. Poetry like Neruda and Keats, but also diving deep into Marx, Lenin. And he was into science, too. Had a little chemical lab set up in his garage.
Okay, that image is something else. This privileged, asthmatic athlete, reading Marx and running chemistry experiments in the garage, that's quite a mix.
It really sets the stage, doesn't it? And then comes the travel. He started studying medicine in Buenos Aires in '48, but pretty quickly, his real education seemed to happen on the road.
He took a trip across northern Argentina first, right? On a motorized bike.
Yeah, 4,500 kilometers, sort of a warm-up maybe.
And then the big one. The famous motorcycle journey in 1952 with his friend Alberto Granado. 8 months, 8,000 miles across Latin America.
That was it. That was the absolute turning point. This is where all that theory he'd read back in his comfortable home library just slams into the harsh reality of the continent.
The poverty, the oppression.
Exactly. His medical training almost took a backseat to the social diagnosis he was making.
Yeah.
He saw firsthand the grinding poverty, the exploitation under capitalism, kids starving, peasants working impossible hours for almost nothing.
The classic rich getting richer, poor getting poorer scenario, but right in front of his eyes.
And it hit him hard. He saw the system benefiting a few at the brutal expense of the many.
And he documented it all, didn't he, in his diary?
Meticulously. Which later became the Motorcycle Diaries. That book, and later the film, captured how that journey transformed him. It wasn't just intellectual curiosity anymore. It became this absolute driving commitment to overturn the whole system for the people he'd seen suffering.
So that fire lit under him, it leads him straight into politics.
Pretty much directly. His first real revolutionary involvement was in Guatemala in 1953. He went there to support President Jacobo Arbenz.
Arbenz was trying to bring in social and economic reforms, right?
Yeah.
Land redistribution, things like that.
Yes, exactly. Attempting quite ambitious reforms. And this is where Che gets a very stark lesson in geopolitics.
Enter the United States.
Precisely. The U.S., backing capitalism and its own corporate interests like the United Fruit Company, was deeply unhappy with Arbenz's social agenda.
And the result?
The CIA stepped in. They orchestrated events, pressured the military, and ultimately forced Arbenz to resign. A military government took over.
Wow. So Guevara sees this happen firsthand.
And it completely solidifies his worldview. He becomes utterly convinced that the U.S. will crush any progressive leftist government anywhere in Latin America. That armed struggle, revolution, is the only path forward.
It kind of locked him into that path, didn't it? No room for compromise after seeing that.
It seems so. And it was around this time in Guatemala, the sources say, that he got the nickname Che. It's a common Argentinian interjection, sort of like pal or mate.
Okay, so Guatemala falls apart for him. We're next.
He had to flee. He ended up in Mexico in 1954. He actually went back to medicine for a bit, working as an allergist in a hospital.
But that didn't last long, I imagine.
Not at all. History comes calling again. June 1955, Mexico City. He meets two Cuban brothers, Fidel and Raul Castro.
And they have a plan.
They certainly do. They're plotting to overthrow Fulgencio Batista, the military dictator back in Cuba. Batista was seen by many, including the Castros and Che, as basically a puppet of the United States.
So Che finds his cause.
It was the perfect fit, really. Castro needed committed fighters and thinkers. Che needed a revolution to join. He immediately signs up with Castro's 26th of July movement.
And he wasn't just a foot soldier. He was involved in training, right? Guerrilla warfare tactics.
Absolutely. He helped train the initial group of 82 revolutionaries, focusing on hit-and-run tactics, the guerrilla warfare he'd later write a manual about.
But the first attempt didn't go so well. The landing in Cuba?
It was a disaster. They sailed from Mexico on this old leaky cabin cruiser, the Grandma. They landed late, in the wrong place, and Batista's army was waiting. Most of the 82 were killed or captured almost immediately.
How many survived?
Only a handful, maybe 20 or so, including Che, Fidel, and Raul. They were forced to retreat into the Sierra Maestra Mountains.
Just a small group against Batista's whole army. Things look bleak.
Extremely. But the Sierra Maestra period is crucial for understanding Che. This is where they started rebuilding, getting support from the local peasants who admired their revolutionary ideas.
And Che wasn't just fighting. You mentioned his background.
Right. While they're training, regrouping, planning the war, Che takes a hard look at the conditions of the people living there. 40% adult illiteracy, he noted. No schools, no electricity, no health care.
So the doctor in him kicks in again.
Exactly. He's organizing the military side, setting up grenade factories, bakeries for the troops, but he's also setting up schools to teach people to read and health clinics to treat the sick. It's this incredible blend of military leader and social reformer happening right there in the mountains.
He really became a key figure for those local communities, didn't he?
They revered him. The sources mention him being seen almost as a messiah figure. He's delivering tangible improvements to their lives while also fighting for a bigger cause. He was putting his socialist ideals into practice before the revolution even won.
And gradually, their numbers grew.
They did. From that tiny group of survivors, they rebuilt their force to about 800 fighters, gaining popular support across Cuba, and eventually.
January 1st, 1959. Victory. Batista flees, Castro's forces take Havana. The U.S. steps back.
A monumental shift. Castro becomes prime minister, and Che. He's immediately made second in command.
That's a huge amount of trust and responsibility.
Castro clearly saw Che's capability, his intelligence, and his unwavering commitment. He wasn't just a fighter, he was an organizer, an ideologue.
And he got some major jobs in the new government.
Oh yeah. He was put in charge of La Cabaña prison, then became head of the industrial department, president of the National Bank, and finally minister of industry. He was central to shaping the new Cuba.
Okay, but this is where the narrative takes a darker turn, according to the sources. The revolutionary becomes the state enforcer.
It is a stark transition. Once the Castro government is established, Che takes a very hard line. The sources describe him beginning to, quote, crush his opponents.
Specifically at La Cabaña prison.
Yes. As commander there, he oversaw trials and executions of members of the old Batista regime, but also, chillingly, people who were simply suspected of opposing the new Castro government. Discipline and ideological purity, communism above all, became paramount.
How did he justify that? Going from setting up health clinics to ordering executions based on suspicion.
It seems tied to his core ideology, this concept of the new man. This is absolutely central for Che.
The new man. What did that mean exactly?
It was this ideal communist citizen. He genuinely believed individuals should strive for moral perfection, completely embracing communist ideals, prioritizing the collective and the revolution over any personal desires or dissent.
And if you didn't measure up?
If you didn't align, if you were seen as imperfect, maybe you grumbled, maybe you held on to old ideas, maybe you were just suspected of counter-revolutionary thoughts, then, in Che's rigid view, you essentially had, quote, no right to live in Cuba.
That's terrifying. And it led to concrete actions beyond executions.
Yes. Around 1960, he established the first labor camps in Cuba, sometimes referred to as concentration camps. The stated goal was to re-educate or evolve those deemed anti-communist or ideologically impure into this new man.
Who ended up in these camps?
A range of people. Political opponents, certainly, but also groups deemed problematic like priests, certain intellectuals, even Afro-Cubans who didn't fit the desired mold. They were subjected to strenuous forced labor.
It's such a jarring contrast because at the same time, he was driving major positive reforms, wasn't he?
He absolutely was. While implementing this harsh ideological control, he was also pushing forward huge national changes. Agrarian reform, breaking up large estates, nationalizing key industries, many previously American-owned, ending privatization in many sectors.
And the literacy campaign.
A massive success. The sources cite the literacy rate jumping from around 60% to an incredible 96% by the end of 1959 alone. That had a profound impact.
And personally, he seemed to live by his own strict code.
Very much so. He was known for fighting corruption within the new government. He insisted on absolute personal integrity. Famously, he refused any special government benefits or perks for his own wife and family, wouldn't use official cars for personal errands, that kind of thing.
An uncompromising idealist in both his public policy and his personal ethics, even as he was enacting these incredibly harsh measures.
It's that paradox again. He also became a prominent voice on the world stage, using his position as a diplomat, for example, to deliver blistering criticisms of U.S. foreign policy at the UN General Assembly in 1964.
Which brings us squarely into the Cold War. Cuba, under Castro and Che, aligns itself with the Soviet Union.
Right, and that relationship deepens, especially after the U.S. cuts diplomatic ties and then launches the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, trying to overthrow Castro.
That failed invasion must have pushed Cuba even closer to the Soviets.
It certainly solidified their alliance, and it led directly to the most dangerous moment of the Cold War.
The Cuban Missile Crisis.
Exactly. Following the Bay of Pigs, Che and Castro agreed to the Soviet Union's plan to place nuclear missiles in Cuba. They saw it as a necessary deterrent against future U.S. aggression.
Bringing the world to the absolute brink of nuclear war in October 1962.
Terrifyingly close. But what's really interesting from the perspective of Che's ideology is what happened after the crisis was resolved.
When Kennedy and Khrushchev made the deal to remove the missiles.
Yes. Che and Castro were furious. They felt the Soviets had backed down, had betrayed the revolutionary cause by compromising with the U.S. imperialists. They strongly opposed the removal of the missiles.
So they were willing to risk nuclear annihilation for the principle?
It certainly seems that way. It caused a major rift, a cooling in the relationship between Cuba and the Soviet Union for a time. And it really highlights Che's ultimate goal.
Which wasn't just about Cuba.
No. For Che, Cuba was just one battlefront. His true aim was global revolution, the complete eradication of capitalism and imperialism worldwide. He couldn't settle into governing Cuba, even as second-in-command. The revolutionary fire had to keep spreading.
He found stability almost boring, or counter-revolutionary.
Perhaps. He needed perpetual struggle. So in 1965, he makes this extraordinary decision. He basically resigns his posts, says goodbye to Cuba, and leaves to foment revolution elsewhere.
He just walked away from being one of the most powerful men in Cuba.
He did. His commitment was to the global cause, not just one nation.
Where did he go first?
His first major effort was in Africa and the Republic of the Congo. He went to support Marxist rebels fighting in the civil war there.
How did that turn out?
It was a failure. The sources suggest the local rebel forces were poorly trained, disorganized, and the whole effort lacked proper planning. Che became deeply disillusioned with the experience.
But he didn't give up on the idea of exporting revolution.
Not at all. After the Congo, he regrouped, secretly returned to Cuba for a time, and then planned his next and final campaign.
Bolivia, 1966.
Yes, he led a small, secret guerrilla force into the Santa Cruz region of Bolivia, hoping to ignite a continent-wide revolution starting there.
But the conditions were different. The Bolivian army?
The Bolivian army was better prepared, and crucially, they had significant support and intelligence from the CIA, who were determined to prevent another Cuba. Che's group found themselves isolated, lacking local peasant support this time.
And it ended with his capture.
It did. On October 8, 1967, after being betrayed by a local informant, his small band was surrounded and overwhelmed. Che himself was wounded and captured.
He spent his last night in a schoolhouse, apparently.
Yes, held in a small, dilapidated school building in the village of La Hirada. The order came down from the Bolivian High Command, likely with U.S. approval. Execute him.
They specifically ordered the soldier, Mario Terán, not to shoot him in the head, right? To make it look like he died in combat.
That's what the reports indicate. Terán carried out the execution on October 9th, and that's when Che reportedly uttered those final defiant words we started with. "I know you're here to kill me. Shoot, coward, you are only going to kill a man."
He was shot 9 times.
9 times in the legs and torso. And then, in a particularly gruesome act to prove his death definitively and prevent his body becoming a relic,
They cut off his hands.
the Bolivian military amputated his hands. They were sent to Buenos Aires for fingerprint identification while his body was buried in an unmarked grave. They desperately wanted to extinguish the man and the myth.
But they failed on the second part, didn't they?
Completely. His death instantly transformed him into a martyr for leftist movements worldwide. That iconic photograph taken shortly after his death became a global symbol.
And eventually, his remains were found and returned to Cuba.
Yes, in 1997, they were discovered near an airstrip in Bolivia, identified, and returned to Cuba with full military honors. He's now interred in a large mausoleum in Santa Clara, the city his forces captured during the revolution. And ironically, a statue was even erected in his birthplace, Rosario, Argentina, in 2008.
So, looking back at everything, the sources paint this incredibly complex picture. Privileged kid, doctor, intellectual athlete, ethical official who hated corruption.
And yet also the ruthless commander, the executioner of La Cabaña, the architect of labor camps, driven by this absolute, uncompromising ideology of the new man.
He gave up a life of relative ease, ruling alongside Castro because his dedication to global revolution was total. That ideal came before stability, before comfort, even before the success of the Cuban state itself, in a way.
His impact, his legacy, it remains utterly tied to that core belief that the pursuit of the revolutionary ideal justifies almost anything and must take precedence over everything else.
It really leaves you thinking. Che Guevara dedicated his entire life and ultimately sacrificed it to make sure his ideas would outlive him. So, what responsibility do we have as a society when we grapple with ideals, however noble they might seem, that demand such ruthless actions against those who simply disagree or don't fit the mold?
A heavy question. Definitely something to reflect on until our next deep dive.